Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2. 1. Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark, a.k.a. Derringer. Today is Sunday, May 6th, and you are listening to episode 155 of the Instant Action Podcast, your weekly source for PlanetSide 2 news and information. As always, I'm brought to you by great listeners like you via the Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com. So obviously, what's been going on with me this past week? Lots of PlanetSide 2 play here and there during the week. Random stuff going on. Nothing major, to tell you the truth. I still haven't spent my ASP point, and I know everybody's probably at the point now with what the hell's your problem? Why haven't you spent your ASP point already? And it's because, honestly, I didn't get to play as much of the double XP weekend as I wanted to this past weekend, so I didn't level up as fast as I wanted to, and then it seems like every time I logged into the game, guys I play with none of them were playing blue. So as a result, I did not rank up as much as I had wanted to on my NC character. And therefore, like I said, I still haven't spent that silly little ASP point, even though I'm definitely leaning more towards unlocking the LMG axis on my engineer. I mean, I guess I could easily do the heavy weapon secondary on NC, but I'm not so much a fan of using the jackhammer as a secondary on heavy assault as I am using still a pistol for heavy assault. But on an engineer, I think being able to start off with carbine and then being able to switch to an LMG might be the way that I want to go when I do finally spend that point. I mean, certainly I'm also toying with spending it on an SMG secondary for the light assault, but I just haven't convinced myself that that's what I want to do yet, because, you know, I enjoy playing light assault, but not as much as I enjoy playing engineer. But then the other side of that coin is I've already finished the Araxium armor for the engineer, so why do I continue to play an engineer class? And obviously just the grenades on Infiltrator aren't really that great, so yeah, big friggin' whoop. So yeah, that's kind of where I am on the ASP point right now, and like I said, still haven't spent it, and it's totally my fault for not playing the game enough to have unlocked it. Maybe this next week I'm just gonna sit down, focus only on NC, get to BR25, spend that first point, and then move forward. Yeah, I think that's probably gonna be my goal for this upcoming week. But other than that, the weather is beautiful here in Massachusetts. So it was actually 90 degrees last week, a couple days, which is absolutely insane for that would have been early May at this particular point. So, but honestly, enough about me. What is actually in store for this week's show? Well, first, I have a PTS update to talk about, followed by some unannounced Carapace changes that made it to live on the PS4 and will be coming to the PC. After that, I want to talk about the hints at new stuff coming that we saw on Reddit this past week, and also finish up by talking about a video on the death of PlanetSide based on some listener feedback. So strap in as we hot drop into another episode of the Instant Action Podcast. So first up this week, like I said, May 3rd, we got a PTS update. Again, PTS is only available on PC side. Sorry, PS4 folks. The big thing that was dropped in this particular update is the changes that are coming to alerts and events. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this today. So to begin with the whole thing, hives have been completely removed from the game on PTS, and that's something that Rel had said was going to be happening eventually, and it's now, while it's not on live, it's certainly on PTS, so it's probably a very short time from actually coming to live. So since hives are gone, they can obviously, or they are no longer required to trigger a meltdown alert, because in the past you had to mine a whole bunch of cordium, get it into hives, and have those hives producing those points in order for the final tally of final portion of the meltdown alert to trigger. So since they are no longer there, instead the continents themselves are going to flow through a bunch of different states before they become actually locked. So the system itself is not fully implemented, and events may not trigger as they're intended on PTS, but just bear with them because they are continuing to build the system. So right now, the current goal is to have a continent unlock, and it's going to begin with in that initial unstabilized region mode where you just have the direct line down to the middle of the map and fighting through that. And then what'll happen is obviously that is a mini event in and of itself. Once that finishes off, the regions are actually going to stabilize. And then the warp gates are going to enter what's called a quote-unquote charging phase. And that charging phase itself is going to be approximately 5 hours in time length. And during that 5 hours, events are going to fire off periodically. Now, events, we've talked about in the past, they're hinting at the facility events that are coming back. And it looks like during that charging stage, while those events are going off, the first event is probably going to kick off 30 minutes after it enters that charging phase. The second one is going to enter at the 120-minute mark, and the third one will happen at the 210-minute mark. And again, at the moment, the only events that they've got in system are facility capture events. And anybody who's been a long-time player of the game remembers these facility capture events. And those were, capture all biolabs on a continent, or capture all tech plants on a continent, capture all amp stations on a continent, things like that. Those are the ones that we're going to see in the first iteration. And probably the only reason we're seeing those first is because they've already built those and we've already played those in the past. So it's much easier, in my opinion, or I imagine, for them to drop that into the game as an existing asset and push those out while they continue to work on other ones in the background. Hopefully, like they've talked about, we'll see stuff with, reduced air cost or reduced armor cost or things like that. Could be other events that we see in the future. Now, once the warp gates finish this charging phase, they are considered fully charged, and then the meltdown alert itself can be triggered. Now, the meltdown alert is being changed into a winner-take-all territory alert. So like previously, the alert's going to be triggered by the first faction to hit 41% territory control. But the faction that now has the most territory at the end of the alert will lock the continent. Now, the other kicker here is the meltdown alert itself is going to last 1 hour and 30 minutes rather than the current 45-minute meltdown alert. Now, I reached out to Nick Silva to ask him, what he thought of the hour and 30 minutes. And specifically, I said that that hour and 30 minutes kind of seemed long to me. And especially, let's say, just as a random example, that this meltdown alert kicks off late at night. And by late at night, I mean, for an old man like me, 10 p.m. Eastern or 10 p.m., whatever time it is for you, that's usually when I log off Planetside 2 and think about going to bed. Because I do have to get up in the morning for work. So if that meltdown alert kicks off close to that 10 p.m. time frame for me on a normal work day or work night, I'm not going to participate in meltdown alerts. And I'm worried that that's going to affect a lot of players. You're not going to see... and again, it's all dependent on the time. Now, if a meltdown alert kicks off at 8 p.m., for me, I'm all over it, and I'm going to play it start to finish, and I'm going to be in the whole thing, playing the entire thing. But I'm concerned that depending on when continents unlock and everything moves, I don't think it's going to be a real fluid set time frame for all this to happen, and a lot of stuff can depend on what continent you're on and how quickly somebody hits 41% territory control and things like that. So I'm worried that these meltdown alerts are going to get triggered at odd times of the day, and that might not be beneficial to players. And So Nick asked me, in order to assist with my beauty sleep, what would be a better time frame? And honestly, my response to him was that I don't know if there is a better time frame. And the reason that is because the 1 hour and 30-minute mark really sets an epic meltdown type of event. If this is going to be the huge culmination of a bunch of different events going on the continent, and then finally the last chance for this to unlock, you want it to be a decent amount of time, and you want it to really feel like there's a lot of back and forth throughout the entire alert, and that ultimately someone does win it at the end of it. And giving it an hour, 30 minutes is going to really stop those quick, one faction, quickly rolls over the entire map and just sits on that and doesn't have to worry about it. That's much easier to do with a 45-minute alert than it is to do with an hour and a half alert. So my response to Nick was that you're probably doing it correct by having it be an hour and a half, and I'm just kind of being a curmudgeon-y old man like I feel sometimes, based on that they might launch late in the day for me. But again, I do think that the hour, 30 minutes is probably the way to start and kind of go from there. Once they get some feedback regarding it, and maybe too many of them are kicking off at odd times of the day, or things like that maybe they'll retweak it and move from there. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the differences with the mini alerts or mini events, as they're certainly called. And I'm curious to see what kind of new events that they might be putting together to kind of put in front of us that we can play with. I'm hoping we get all kinds of random different stuff. I mean, the facility ones can kind of get boring after a while if you see them over and over again. But if they have 10 or 15 or 20 different event alerts kind of in the stable that are all randomized, it could produce some really interesting gameplay as it moves on. The only other change is the Warp Gate stabilizing event now is going to last 10 minutes instead of 5 minutes. And obviously the Warp Gates stabilize when you get enough people onto the continent itself. So there's kind of the changes to the alerts and events in a nutshell. I mean, I certainly went a little bit longer there than the patch notes indicate, but I'm interested in it. I want to see it. Let's get this off of test server and get this onto live sooner rather than later. And even if we just get the winner-take-all meltdown, that's going to make a lot of people happier than they are now. Moving along, let's get to the construction side of this patch, because like I said, hives removed from the game completely because they no longer serve a purpose. But other than that, the glaive, IPC, and the flail, you can no longer pull targeting devices from them when they have no nearby AI turret module. And also, their targeting darts will expire with an error message when placed incorrectly. Finally, equipping a flail targeting device now shows no construction zones while they are held. The Pain Spire, the Routing Spire, and the Router, they all have new art. The Router will also show up as a minimap icon as well. And also, a single player may now place up to 2 vehicle gate shield objects. Now, if you're playing around with these on the PTS, note that the router is broken with this update, and they will fix it by the time the next one comes out. Next, the Vehicle Gate Shield and the Sunder Garage. The Vehicle Gate Shield now prevents players from spawning other objects where the shield would normally go. And the Vehicle Gate Shield no longer requires a structure shield module to power it. And finally, the Sunder Garage itself has been widened. Now, I know a lot of people have been posting videos of bugs and rendering issues with these. The devs are aware of them, and they're certainly working on them. Next, the Rampart Walls and Bunker. The Rampart Wall now has stairs in a half moon toward the edges of the wall, and they added more depth to the bunker so that pieces float above the terrain less often than they were on live. The Cordium Silo had some changes as well. When it's lower than 500 Cordium, squad mates are going to be notified periodically. Cordium Silos also can no longer be locked from public use. However, a Cordium reserve of 10,000 has been added that only squad members and the owner have access to. Other miscellaneous changes, vehicles spawned from construction bases no longer have a nanite cost. I know that was kind of an annoying thing for me. They're going to be straight up Cordium costs. Splash damage should no longer go through structure shields. Players should no longer be able to place construction objects in the ground or in the air or inside other construction objects. Now, I'm sure people will still find ways to do that and obviously report them when you do come across them. Finally, moving on to vehicles and other changes, the Prowler had its anchor mode certs completely refunded because, as we know in the last update, anchor mode has now been integrated into the vehicle itself and modified. Instead, that Barrage now has a full 4-rank certification line. As you rank it up, the ability now has a cooldown ranging from 60 all the way down to 45 seconds, depending on how you ranked it. And the certification cost per rank is 100, 200, 500, and 1,000, same as the old anchored mode. So the good news is, if you have maxed out anchor mode originally on your main battle tank, you're getting all those certs refunded to you, and then you're going to be able to immediately dump all those certs into Barrage. So it's really not a loss of anything if you previously had anchored mode. And I know a lot of people had anchor mode completely certed out. So I do think it's a good idea to make the cert cost the exact same for Barrage so that people can immediately get on it and not feel that they're at any sort of disadvantage now that the Prowler has a new mode to it or a new tweak to it, and therefore you got to dump all kinds of new certs into it. You know, the Vanguard and the Mag Rider, those pilots have already dumped all their certs in and don't have to worry about it. So again, very smart for them to leave the certification cost the same based on that cert refund that they're doing. Finally, the MR11 Gatekeeper on both the Prowler and the Harasser variant got its minimum velocity increased, it's got its reload speed increased, it's got its damage increase, and just on the Harasser, it had its cone of fire maximum decreased. And the goal here was to bump up the alpha damage and reload time to quicken the weapon's time to kill against other main battle tanks by about 2.5 seconds, while keeping the Harasser's time to kill the same or better if composite armor is equipped. Removing the projectile acceleration should also make it easier to deliver a full payload over longer distances because that projectiles no longer accelerate to maximum velocity as part of that minimum velocity change. The cone of fire buff for the Harasser version should push its effective range a bit closer to the Prowler's. Overall, the weapon will still have less effective range and reliability than a skillful halberd user, but should have stronger hard benefits for its intended role now. Other than that, Steve-O's VS Skyfall armor is now on PTS, so you can go and check it out. And there were a whole bunch of other bug fixes and miscellaneous changes, one of which I'm going to talk about next. And that bug fix, I guess it's not really a bug fix, it's a Carapace nerf itself. And this was originally identified by folks over on the PS4 side of Planetside 2. And basically they discovered, it wasn't in the patch notes, that Carapace heal stacking was no longer working. So if you were trying to use Resto Kit and also Nano Regen, you're going to have the heal rate of Nano Regen as if you never had a Resto Kit. And that's actually something that's listed in the PTS notes on the PC side. It says, Restoration Kits no longer stack with healing from the medic's Nano Regen device. So they immediately asked Rel, the PS4 folks did, because, again, this was not something that was in the PS4 patch notes. It kind of made its way through accidentally, I guess. But Rel said that it is an intended change, though it didn't make it to the PS4's patch notes. The change is specific to only Restos and the Nano Regen device. And there may be some other implant changes that made it to PS4 before PC as well, but weren't mentioned in the patch notes. But when he looked into it further, that didn't seem to be the case. But he did say that Sensor Shield is going to be getting a buff, but is all still behind closed doors until the next update. So what really is happening here is everybody's trying to say that this is kind of a misleading title, that stacking is no longer working. What it really is that the double stacking of Resto and Medic Nano Regen when you're using Carapace specifically has been nerfed. Again, you're still able to use a Resto kit on Carapace as long as you're not using nano regen along with it. So don't think that Carapace is still completely worthless, because I know a lot of people are using it on the infiltrator, so you're not affected by EMPs, and that people are still using it as heavies as long as they have dedicated squad medics. It's still working quite well for them. But this is really just affecting the Carapace medics that we're seeing in the game a lot, that are able to kind of stay alive much longer than you think they should be able to stay alive, because they're stacking the resto kits and the nano regen at the same time. When you pop both the resto kit and use the nano regen, you're able to tank a lot of damage when you have Carapace active. A lot more than people think should be effective within the game itself, and that's definitely why we're seeing this nerf to Carapace. So the next thought regarding this, I'm sure there are going to be quite a few people once this goes live crying that they spent a lot of money trying to get Carapace. But in all honesty, this is something that kind of was a little overpowered and unfair to other people. And sure, maybe you spent money to get it, but remember, this is not a pay-to-win game, even though a lot of people like to say that it's a pay-to-win game. And unfortunately, if the devs feel that something is overpowered, and this, people have to admit, is a little bit overpowered, it's going to get nerfed. And we've seen that this has been nerfed on PTS. Again, if you're playing on the PS4, this is already out on PS4. You cannot stack Resto and Medic Nano Regen with Carapace on the PS4. It is not live on PC yet, but it will be coming to PC once this PTS stuff comes to live. So I would expect something like this. I guess it all depends on how they feel about this Meltdown stuff. We could see something as early as this week. And why do I think we might see something as early as this week? Well, on Planetside 2's Twitter, they did specifically say, they said yesterday on 2 days ago on May 4th, that they're going to be doing a dev live stream on Tuesday, May 8th at 2 p.m. Pacific. So get ready for that. I'm sure they're going to announce what's exactly coming and when we're going to see the next game update within the PC side of the game itself. But with that, let's move on to our third topic this week. And that third topic was kind of, it's a response, sort of a response, because there was, last week obviously I did all the stuff about Serious Gaming's video and how a lot of people were kind of down on Planetside 2 right now because of that video and some of the other things that he said, and how people are feeling about the game itself. And Doku put a post up on Reddit saying that there's loads of really cool stuff currently in the works for Planetside 2, and he says, obviously I'm not at liberty to talk about anything, but I just think people should know that some really, really exciting things are being worked on right now and in the near future. Being a huge fan of the game, it's a struggle to not be able to shout out loud about all this cool shit. And I'm super excited about the work I've been given. So keep on believing in this game. It's far from over. Hashtag Planetside 2 still has legs. So what this says to me, and obviously I have not talked to Doku, and I would not talk to him about something that he's working on behind the scenes, because he would not release that information to me. And if by some odd stretch of the imagination he did tell me what he was working on, it is confidential stuff, and I would not be able to release it to you guys, and I apologize for that. But there is some interesting stuff obviously coming down the pipeline, because not only do we have confirmation that Doku's working on some stuff, but Rel has also hinted that Steve-O could be working on some stuff like this, or Faven could be working on some new things for the game. So does that mean we're getting perhaps another new round of weapon design? Could we be getting some new armors? Could we getting a reskin of all the existing armors in game, which a lot of people have been asking for since the game launched? Who knows? But there's definitely a lot of stuff clearly going on behind the scenes with some of the more talented artists for the game, talented artists that have been creating things for the game and have been contracted by PlanetSide to do stuff like that. So kind of exciting that there's some things going on behind the scenes that we kind of don't know about. Also, Roxley pointed out that the 15 years of PlanetSide 2 stuff is coming up as well. While they haven't really given us any detailed big picture news about it, this is also something that I expect they're going to be talking about a lot on the dev live stream that's going to be happening on Tuesday. So certainly make sure you tune in on Tuesday for the dev live stream. As you know, they'll always do giveaways during that as well. So you do have a small chance on earning some Daybreak cash that you can spend on whatever awesome new stuff might be coming down the pipeline. I'm hoping a lot of it has to do with the 15 years of PlanetSide stuff that is coming up. So I agree with what Doku said. I'm not giving up on PlanetSide 2 yet because I still have fun every time I log in. So that's going to be that on that topic. All right, last topic this week was based on an email that I received from one of my listeners. His name is Natch, and Natch wrote to me, "Hi, Derringer, thought you might want to watch this video by Downward Thrust and give it your thoughts on it. I thought he raised some interesting points." And I'll include a link to this video so you guys can watch it as well. It's about a 13-minute video. And he's talking about the fall of PlanetSide 2. Yeah, it's titled The Fall of PlanetSide 2. And I did go and watch this particular video. It's titled The Fall of PlanetSide 2, a franchise that didn't deserve to fail. And he does some talk about how the original PlanetSide was and what the new PlanetSide 2 certainly is. And he does admit that he's not a PlanetSide expert, but he was a gamer during the time of this franchise. And his hope is that this small video helps showcase the gaming climate that helped facilitate the successes and failings of the PlanetSide games. It was an okay video. Now, he did give a lot of good information about the original PlanetSide, how it came to be, what it was competing against at the time, how it spawned PlanetSide 2, what people get out of PlanetSide 2, how he thinks both the original PlanetSide failed and how he feels like the current PlanetSide 2 is failing or has failed or is not lived up to expectations of the player base. And like I said, basically, Natch, I'm doing this for you since you requested it. I don't know that I agree with everything that they put into this video itself. Specifically, the end portion of the video where he talks about how the game itself is not designed for the casual player. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that it's not designed for the casual player, because I do think if somebody picks up the game and plays with it for a little while, that they'll get the nuances of it and be able to play it. Granted, I agree that PlanetSide 2 is not new player friendly, and it never really has been new player friendly, and maybe it's just catering more towards veterans at this particular time in the game, or groups of new people coming into it that are dedicating a lot of time to play it, to trying to get better at it. I also don't think that PlanetSide has failed, so to speak. I mean, the original PlanetSide went from 2003 through a long time. I played it for years and years and years, and I can't really consider that a failure. At this point, for PlanetSide 2, I've been playing the game since 2012. It is now 2018, and PlanetSide 2 is still going strong. We've seen constant posts from the devs saying that, when they make money in the game, they're able to take that money and push it out towards doing other things within the game itself, hiring people to do artwork. Like last topic, I talked about Doku, Faven, Steve-O, things like that. I don't think that PlanetSide 2 has failed, like this video specifically says. Yes, I agree with what you said, Natch. He does bring up some interesting points and some good points within it, but again, I just don't feel that this game itself has failed. I find it still an enjoyable game to play. I don't play it every day. I don't need to play it every day. I pick the game up when I want to have a good time. And if that's considered a failure, then there's a lot of games out there that I consider a failure. You know, I pick up the game faster than light every now and then and play it once, and I'm done with it. Does that mean that game's a failure? No, it's supremely popular for how simple that it actually is. Once a month, I play Overwatch. You know, I don't play it every day. By this guy's definition, that kind of would be a failure, and I don't necessarily agree with that either. You know, there's a lot of games out there for people to play, and even if you play PlanetSide a couple times a week, then I think that that's a win for the developers themselves. So that being said, I think it's a worthwhile video for people to go and take a look at, if anything, just to kind of get the history of the original PlanetSide, because everybody who's creating PlanetSide 2 now, none of the original PlanetSide people are creating PlanetSide 2. You know, it's interesting that all those people put all that time into it back in 2003 and beyond, and you've kind of got a completely different group of people creating PlanetSide 2 at this particular juncture in time. Interesting to see the differences between the two games. And yes, the original PlanetSide, for what it was very high-tech at the time, but now it is so dated it's not funny. But again, interesting video. Thanks for the recommendation, Natch. If anybody else has any recommendations of videos or things like that you think I should take a look at and put some comment toward, please feel free to send it over to me via email, instantactionshow@gmail.com. But with that, let's move on to housekeeping for this week's show.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please.
Housekeeping.
Not now.
Housekeeping.
Go away.
I coming anyway?
And that bit of housekeeping was just the email that I got from Natch, which, like I said, I read earlier and put it into a specific topic this week. So that's going to be it for this week's show. But how can you get in touch with me or the show itself? As always, visit my website, www.instantactionpodcast.com. Send me an email, instantactionshow@gmail.com, just like Natch did. Call me, leave me a voicemail, 347-4VM-4PS2 or 347-486-4772. Follow me on Twitter @InstActPodcast or follow my personal Twitter, which is @TheDerringer. So in closing, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave me a review on your podcast listening avenue of choice, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere else. Also, feel free to tell your friends and outfit mates about the show. And finally, thanks for listening, and keep spamming that Join Combat, formerly known as Instant Action button.
Get your arms combined.